This podcast is for informational purposes only and does not dispense medical advice. Always seek the advice of a physician or other qualified health providers if you have any questions regarding a medical condition. Never disregard professional medical advice or delay in seeking such advice because of something you have heard on this podcast. Welcome to a show that we like to call Prostate Cancer Real Talk. Did you know that in the U.S., 1 out of every 8 men will be diagnosed with prostate cancer during his lifetime? 1 out of 8. And black men are 50% more likely to develop prostate cancer in their lifetime and twice as likely to die from the disease. But hey, we're not here to quote statistics and tell you how tough prostate cancer can be. Rather, we are here to create a supportive community of survivors. A place where we can discuss the real-life coping methods from the perspective of a married couple who are living through it day by day. Our hosts, Elle and Shay. This is Prostate Cancer Real Talk. In this episode, we welcome Simon T. Bailey. Simon is an award-winning keynote speaker who teaches people how to harness their strengths, how to bounce back stronger from setbacks, and build a life of meaning. His personal life journey is a living example of resilience, from overcoming academic hurdles in high school to enduring personal hardships, including divorce and his battle with prostate cancer. Each chapter of his life has fortified his resolve to lift and inspire others. With the Disney Institute as the launch pad for his career, he has left an indelible mark on over 2,400 organizations across 54 countries. His clients include American Express, Deloitte, Visa, Signet Jewelers, and Taco Bell. A full listing of Simon's books and links to his motivational speaking engagements are posted on our guest speakers page on our website. Elle and Shay, take it away.
Well, Dennis, thank you very much for that wonderful introduction, and welcome Simon T. Bailey to our podcast. Simon, it's wonderful to have you today. How are you?
I'm with Elle and Shay. My stock just went up. My day just got better.
Hi, Simon.
How are you?
I'm good. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's awesome.
So in addition to being and what we'll say as a world-renowned motivational speaker, Simon also happens to be a prostate cancer survivor. And so I met Simon several years ago at a speaking engagement that he was doing. And I learned after the fact that he was a prostate cancer survivor once we started our podcast, and we asked him to come in and share his perspective on his personal journey, which is a great example of resilience and overcoming challenges and difficulty. And we want Simon to kind of just share his thoughts on perseverance, motivation. And why don't we start out by asking you a little bit your perspective, your story about your background and how you got to this point.
Wow. Well, as a prostate cancer thriver, I like to say, grew up in Buffalo, New York. Mom and dad dropped me off at Morehouse College. At the end of my freshman year at Morehouse, they said, we don't have the money to send you back to Morehouse, nor do we have money to bring you back to Buffalo, but we do love you. And this is where you insert bless his heart.
It's kind of like figure it out. Bless his heart.
Bless his heart.
So I dropped out of Morehouse, moved into a drug-infested community in the southwest part of Atlanta. Only had a mattress on the floor, bright green beanbag from the 70s. I was on public transportation. One of the lowest points in my life. Got a job at a Days Inn hotel, making $5.10 an hour as a front desk clerk. And I was lost, 19 years of age and lost. Fast forwarding, I did go back to school, got my undergrad, and eventually my master's degree. I was just on the 10-year plan.
Okay.
My parents said, it took you 10 years to finish your degree. I said, because you didn't pay, but I do.
Right.
So I believe that was a marker for me at 19, perseverance, resilience, figuring it out. Fast forwarding, moved to Orlando, Florida, worked for Hyatt Hotels, the Orlando Tourism Bureau, eventually joined Disney. That in and of itself was a journey because it was a 2-year process, 10 interviews, and a 10-page psychological analysis from Gallup. And I guess they figured out I wasn't going anywhere. So eventually, after 2 years, they hired me. So just the ability to stick with it and to show up for each interview as if it was the first one. I'm happy to be here and I'm going to get this job.
Right.
So that was an actual 2-year evaluation interviewing process. Wow.
Yeah. And believe it or not, still to this day, I keep in contact with the recruiter who first hired me at Disney. She's about to retire after almost 50 years of working there.
Wow.
But still keep in contact. So did that. And then eventually I reached a place where Disney had sent me to Paris in 1999 to design a leadership program for 1,000 leaders out of Barclays Bank out of London. And while I was in Paris, that's when Ellen Shea, I had the epiphany that the money was in content. So you had these 1,000 leaders who wanted to learn how did Disney do it. And they were there for the content. So when I came back to Florida, I said, you know what? I'm not staying. I'm not the gold watch guy. I'm going to go out and create my own content. And that was a little accelerated when I got a call from a journalist. And whenever you work at Disney, you never talk to the media. And he said to me, where do you see yourself 10 to 15 years from now? And I said, I see myself as president and CEO of the Walt Disney World Resort and eventually chairman and CEO of the Walt Disney Company. He puts this in print. Article comes out, page 12, Florida Business Trend magazine. A boss calls me in the office. What were you thinking when you did this interview? And I said, Larry, I worked at this company whose motto is if you're hardest in your dreams, no request is too extreme for. When you wish upon a star, makes no difference who you are, but obviously it does here. So funny today, not funny then. HR shows up, asked me to sign a piece of paper that went into my personal file. And let's just say, air quotes, Disney didn't fire me that day, but I heard the footsteps coming and they were not singing. It's a small world after all.
Right.
So I decided 22 years ago, it's probably in my best interest to leave Disney. And that became another marker for me in resilience.
So that was the example of you can't fire me, I quit.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. And then after leaving Disney, I decided to turn down 4 jobs. I put my resume out on the street just in case. Got 2 vice president's offers, an internal move at Disney. One of the senior VPs felt sorry for me, and a senior director opportunity to head up all customer care for their owners in the world. And I turned it all down because I answered 3 questions when I was in Paris so many years ago. What would I do if I knew I couldn't fail? What would I do if no one paid me to do it? What makes me come alive? And a book I was reading at the time, written by an author named John Elridge, in his book, Wild at Heart, John says, don't ask what the world needs, ask what makes you come alive, because what the world needs are people who come alive. And that question for me, Ellen Shea, has just been an anchor point that I always go back to that question, what makes me come alive? So since that time, we have worked with organizations around the world to maximize the brilliance of their most important asset, that being people.
Just a reminder, to ensure that you stay up to date on the latest episodes from Prostate Cancer Real Talk, don't forget to hit that subscribe and like button.
Okay. So as it pertains to your prostate cancer journey, I know that my life changed when I received the diagnosis, and I kind of felt like, this is strange, but I felt like getting prostate cancer for me was my assignment from God, okay? Because without my diagnosis, we would not have this opportunity to come before literally millions of people via our podcast to carry this message forward. As Dennis played in our opening, we know that Black men are 50% more likely to get prostate cancer and twice as likely to die from it. And so what we did was to take my personal experience, or our personal experience, because this is, we call it a couple's disease, to take our personal experience. And this was Shay's idea, actually. I have to give her credits. Being a media person, she suggested that we do this. So that was our calling. So talk to us a little bit about your diagnosis and the impact that it had on your life, and how's that go down with a person that gets this diagnosis? What was your personal experience with that?
Well, first of all, I just want to celebrate and honor what you and Shay are doing, because you are reaching so many men and giving voice to the voiceless, and giving platform for men to hear what's possible. So yes, it's true that the hand that rocks the cradle rules the world. So thank you for listening to Shay. Mm-hmm. So when I look at my journey in prostate cancer, I was having some challenges always in the restroom, just always. And I went to the doctor just for a random, checkup. And my doctor referred me to a specialist. And after going through that whole process, and let me just add a little piece here. I am not a person that does hospitals, doctors, like that is not my jam. Okay. Mm-hmm. So all of a sudden I'm going for a biopsy and all these different things. And just that journey in and of itself, when the results came back, my Gleason score was 6 and 7. And it was like, what are you talking about? And so I started to do all of the research, because I had several older men in my life who were mentors or friends of friends who had been through their prostate journey. So I talked to one guy who went through chemo and all of the different ways to approach it. And for me, I said, I am relatively young. Now, let me just pause here. I had the trifecta of everything happening after my prostate cancer diagnosis. So, okay, there's prostate cancer, like retro, what's going on, dealing with the divorce, and slap with $500,000 worth of debt owed to the IRS. So there's diagnosis, there's divorce, and there's debt. And oh, by the way, 2 children getting ready to go to college, and there was not a 529 or a college savings plan for them because of the divorce. Okay, so all of that happening at one time. To put it lightly, did I call on Jesus, Muhammad, Buddha? Like, what was going on? Because I had been a success. I had persevered, but everything was failing at that particular time. And now I have this health issue that I have to deal with. So number one, I was scared. Number two, every bit of faith that I had was challenged. Resilience was living in a far land. It was not a part of my life. And there were probably many times when I was up over, staying up hours just trying to figure out what am I going to do. And because I did not have a spouse or significant other at that particular time to walk me through the journey, it became even more devastating for me. I should go on to say, and I know this might come as a shock, L, to you and Shay, but I am a socialized introvert. So publicly, I'm like, hey, happy to be here. But privately, I like my quiet time. I don't really talk to a lot of people, and I don't bring a lot of people into my business. So now to be this public-facing person with a diagnosis, I'm like, I am not sharing my business. Like, this is crazy. And eventually I had to make some decisions. So the first thing I decided to do was to do the high dose radiation treatment, because I traveled a lot and I didn't want to go and do the chemo because of some of the feedback that I had gotten from other men. And I realized I also needed to change my diet. I needed to exercise. And so I all of a sudden said, okay, we've got to get on top of this. And Dr. Maureen Hoselick, shout out to Dr. Maureen. She was the one who administered my 5 weeks of high dose radiation.
What facility was she at?
She's at Sand Lake Medical, which is here in Orlando, Florida. Vanderbilt Medical School, wonderful, wonderful doctor. She just kind of helped me think through, even when I went for the high dose radiation, just to think about mentally how I was doing and how I would get through this and get on the other side. Mm-hmm. So hats off to having a great doctor. And I researched because, when you go and you get the diagnosis, then that doctor refers you to their friend. Wink, wink. Okay. Right. And there was nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong. But I wanted to do my own research. And when I did my own research and I started looking at her Google reviews and other men who have been going to Dr. Moraine, and what really helped me say yes is that for her in doing this oncology work, it was not about the treatment, get a shot, which could be very transactional, and then you leave. It was about the psychological, emotional conversation about what I was feeling and dealing with. So when I went for my treatment, it kind of became like a therapeutic session as well. I was already in therapy because I was dealing with some things from the divorce, some trauma, some things that I needed to address in my unfinished business. But when I had my health, when we got into that conversation, it was so helpful. And I didn't dread going for the high dose radiation. I said, okay, I'm going to get through this. And I'm glad I did.
So as you're talking, several things stood out to me. First of all, you said you consulted with some of your friends and associates who had experienced prostate cancer, which means that there was an open dialogue. All right, mm-hmm. which for Black men in particular, a lot of times that does not happen. Okay, so that was one positive step that you took. The other thing that you said was that because of your divorce and the other things that were going on in your life, you were involved with counseling, which is also another smart thing that a lot of people don't do. And then you made the decision for high dose radiation based on your lifestyle and what you had to do to fit the appropriate treatment into your schedule. Mm-hmm. And then the other thing that you said was the relationship that you had with your doctor, which went beyond medical treatment. And that's what, one of the things that we bring out here on the podcast, and that is this experience, this challenge. We have a lot of doctors, surgeons, and people like that on, but it goes well beyond that into your psyche, all right? The relationship that you have with your spouse, with your family and the other friends. So could you respond to those, that 4 things that I mentioned and why those things were so important? Of course, you just did them, okay? It doesn't it's not like somebody directed you. You just, the universe told you to do that, and that's what you did. Mm-hmm. But can you expound on those 4 things that we picked out of your conversation?
Yes, I think one thing that I have to mention is, as a God-fearing Christian believer, I went to my church family, and the mothers of the church began to pray for me, and my pastor prayed over me as well. And so in addition to having that spiritual place that I could turn to, I also knew that I had to do some things in the natural. So I just want to add that thing.
Absolutely. Yes. That's very important.
Yeah. So then when I talked to the gentleman who had gone through prostate, and I'm thinking of 5 different gentlemen that I talked to in the age range of from 50 to late 80s. What was abundantly clear, the older guys that I had talked to that had went through prostate, one of the things they shared, and this is an adult show, so I can be kind of direct and transparent. And so this is the barbershop talk. So
right.
Guys talk.
Right. Real talk.
I can't get it up anymore. And I was like, what? What do you mean? He had chemo. Okay. Mm-hmm. So I was like, whoa, I'm young. I am going to get remarried again, and I want to experience sex. So that scared the living daylights out of me, right? Because I just thought it was him. He was in his 80s until I talked to a guy who was in his 70s. Same thing. Talked to a guy that was in his 60s. Same thing. They went through the chemo and they're like, man, I can't get it up anymore. And so I was like, okay, I don't want to be just focused on, I want to have sex again. I wanted to understand, was there an alternative way? What else was out there? Because the 3 guys that I talked to of the 5, it's kind of like they didn't get on the internet and do any research. They just took what the doctor said as a matter of fact. They didn't seek another opinion or to just get some other data. They went with it. I'm like, I'm not going to be that guy. Like, I need some more information. I need a surround sound of different approaches. So the other 2 guys I talked to, one guy said he tried the bead method, where he did beads, and that worked for him.
So when you say beads, explain a little bit.
So the bead process, the best way I can explain it as I remember it, Ellen Shay, is a doctor prescribes these, I don't want to say it's alternative medicine, but it was a way where you, through the bead process, it addresses the prostate. And so it's something.
So these beads are implanted in the person. Okay.
Mm-hmm. And then I talked to a guy who said it's high dose radiation, where, you go, you get the shot and you're out of there. You're going for 5 weeks instead of 3 to 4 months, consecutively. So I said, you know what? Let me do that research. And what I realized, how I found Dr. Maureen, she was not referred to me by the previous doctor who did the diagnosis, because he had referred me to one of his buddies, and he says, I can get you in, let's go chemo. And I was like, wait a minute, like the rush to chemo, like I need to get another conversation going, just so that I'm not just saying yes. That's like a person signing up for insurance, because you need insurance. So when I did that, that really helped. So I think that's just important that I say that. So then when I look at the rest of what you've asked me, what I really began to realize, I was going to therapy, seeing a therapist named Anita. And the therapist was recommended to me by my divorce attorney, because my divorce attorney said, you've been married for 25 years and you just need to go and talk to someone. So I'm going to Anita Riggs, shout out to Anita, who literally began to help me deal with some of the trauma, some of the issues that I had with my mom at the time. And she said, there's a lot of research out about fathers and daughters. There's emerging research about mothers and sons, and you have some mama issues. And I ended up calling my mom, and my mom said to me, I've been waiting to have this conversation with you for 35 years. So that in and of itself became a healing moment as I was dealing with prostate, as I was working through divorce, to come to a place of wholeness with my mom. And it was identified in therapy. So for those who are listening, if you have not thought about therapy, I'm not trying to push therapy on you, but what I know for me, I suppress a lot of things. I don't necessarily talk. And therapy allowed me to identify some coping skills, to communicate, especially as I was seeking to get into another relationship. And I had just met a young lady. So what I realized is therapy was helping me in my communication skills to use all my tools to be able to say, you know what, I am dealing with a health issue. And I believe I'm going to get on the other side of it. But right now, I am scared as hell. Okay. And so it was just that reality of talking to a group of guys, talking to my mom, going through therapy, gave me the coping skills to thrive when it was dark.
Okay.
So Simon,
Yes.
to be honest, you're the first guest that we've had that did radiation. All our other guests, they've did the surgery. So can you explain to the listeners the process of radiation? What you said, it was a high dose of 5 weeks of radiation. So explain to the listeners the process of the radiation.
Oh, yeah. So I would go to the facility and I would literally lay on a table and they would have a slicer go over me. That's normally how they do like the x-ray, but the slicer actually had like the radiation in it. And I would be there for maybe about 15 or 20 minutes as the slicer goes over my body and everything, the radiation itself. Right. And then I would get up. Now, the one thing Dr. Marine encouraged me to have with me is somebody that could drive me home, because she didn't want me necessarily getting behind the wheel of a car after just going through that. And there might be some other complications or not be as sharp in driving and everything. So I did that.
Okay.
And just for 5 weeks. And then I went back, say, in about 30 days after the 5 weeks was over, for them to do a complete, exam to see how did my body take to it. And I was like 0.01. Like,
oh, really?
Like gone. Like, first of all praise be to God.
Yes.
And thank you to the doctors. And then I would go back every 90 days, 6 months, and then 1 year. So in my 1 year, Dr. Marine said, hey, you're good. I don't need to see you. Just have your primary physician update your PSA, your blood work, send that to me. I'm good. And if I see anything, we'll bring you back in, but we're good. So yeah, that was the process.
Was there any downtime after the radiation session?
I think when I went home, I was a bit tired and I wanted to rest. But the next day, I was back to business as usual, felt great, and I could get on a plane and fly and do what I needed to do. No side effects or anything.
Oh,
and
wow.
I should say the other thing is I had to change my diet.
Yes.
That was something that was critically important. So eating more fruits and vegetables, more greens, cut the sodas, the Kool-Aid, the fruit punch, more water, aloe water, coconut water, getting my 10,000 steps in, just really working on the other side as well.
So you never ever considered surgery. You just, it sounds like you knew I am not having surgery.
Mm-mm. For me, when he said, man, I can't get it up, right. I was like, oh no, yeah. Oh no, I'm not that guy.
And it sounds like, because we've had a couple of guests that were actually diagnosed like in their 40s. And we talk a lot on the podcast about, Black men and, well, men in general, because that's sex. That's the first thing when we talk to guys, that's the first thing that comes up. Like, and some guys even prolong it, making a decision whether or not to even get treated at all, because they're like, look, I'm not going to do anything that's going to change my sex life. And some guys they just go along and don't make a decision. And the prostate cancer in most cases, unfortunately progresses and, they end up with a bad case. But sex it's a determining factor as to what treatment men, decide to go with.
Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel and like this video to keep seeing more content like this from us. It will also benefit YouTube's algorithm, helping to introduce our content to others who may need it most.
After I did my research, and I just didn't research here in America, I researched globally, because sometimes there's some things outside of America. And as I began to research high dose radiation around the world, a lot of guys preferred that and to go the high dose radiation route. And I was like, wow, why is this not talked about more? Now, I'm not a conspiracy theorist or anything like that, but I just kind of go back to my experience. The doctor who diagnosed pushed me to his buddy who said, I could do chemo. I'm the best in the country. And I'm like, is that it? And I'm like, wait a minute, there's got to be another alternative. And I just became curious to find another way.
I do want to make a couple points following up on a couple of the issues that were just recently highlighted in the exchange that the two of you had. So the first point I want to make, when Simon talked about 0.01, he was talking about his PSA level. Am I correct?
Correct.
So after your radiation, was it radiation or chemo?
Radiation.
Yeah. So after your radiation, the PSA level, which is the key determining unit of measurement that is used to determine the existence or the extent of prostate cancer in men, the lower the better. Okay. So if your number starts out with a 0.0, you're on the right track. So and if I recall mine, I think yours may have been this too. Not only is it 0.01, but there's a little less than sign by it. So less than 0.01. They never say 0.00, but they do say less than 0.01, which is in the undetectable range. So that's the first point I wanted to make. And then the other point I wanted to make, Simon, it's a great example of how helpful counseling and therapy can be. And I do want to point the listeners to our website where we have Dr. Kitson Francis, who is a personal family counselor who is available. And so his information is available on our website as well. So he is one of our endorsed guests.
Thank you for listening to today's episode. Please tune in to our next episode as we continue our discussion with Simon T. Bailey, titled Prostate Cancer, Stay Encouraged. You can win. To find out more information on the guest you just heard or previous guests and a list of Prostate Cancer Real Talk episodes, visit our website, prostatecancerrealtalk.com. And if you have a question, comment, or if you would like to share your story, send Elle Shay an email, LandShay@prostatecancerrealtalk.com. That's LEL and Shay, SHAY, at prostatecancerrealtalk.com.